today we are with Mike, otherwise known as MGB from GIMP, and he played GIMP a long time ago. I think you said he played near the beginning, you said, or like, did you start at Premiere or when did you actually start?
Yeah, no, I started about. Um, I think I got right about Dagobah was the first system that or first series that I bought new, right, and then obviously all the ones before it at the same time. But then I played until about Endor came out, and then kind of dropped off and found GIMP about a year and a half ago, and here I am.
Absolutely. No, glad to have you. Yeah, I started like I think it was shortly before Endor launched, and I kind of stayed with Endor till Reflections 2, and that's kind of when I dropped off. But I found GIMP a few years ago, so no, it's been a great opportunity and it's been fun. And so thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's gonna be fun.
All right, so let's get started kind of with the deck tech. So this is kind of the first scavenger deck. So it looks to be a Jawa-based Sandwhirl base. You have how many Jawas is
Yeah,
that? And then three Sandwhirls.
I think 16.
16. All right, impressive, sir. And all right, so prepared defenses, it looks like you're going to start with inconsequential losses, resistance, and there is no try. So kind of tell us about the deck and how it works and kind of why you kind of like this deck so much.
Yeah. So I guess to understand why in the world I would be playing this deck, you kind of have to understand like why I play, right?
Sure.
Um, and so, like, when I first came back and started playing on GAMP, I did the sort of normal, Premiere to DS2, that kind of stuff, and it very quickly got I won't say boring, right? But I
Sure.
remember the time that I thought to myself, like, this isn't much fun. This is kind of repetitive. When I was in one of the Premier to DS2 leagues, and I played 6 games, 3 light side, 3 dark side. All 3 games were against the same deck on the light side. All 3 games were against the same deck on the dark side from different players, and I'm just like, okay, like that's just not what I'm here for, right? And so even when I was playing live, and I played in tournaments and all that stuff in the Colorado region. So if you're watching this and you played in Colorado, you probably saw me at these tournaments. I was the guy bringing. I went to, I think, Colorado State tournament in. I couldn't tell you the year, right? But it was not long after Jabba's Palace came out. I went with a Gamorrean Swarm deck, right? Because that was fun, right? Like I that's the type of thing I play. If everyone else is playing a deck, you can bet I have no interest in playing it, right? So I've never played like one of the example decks on GAM. Interest in playing what someone else is beaten to death, and changing one card in it and saying, oh well, this is my own because I have one card different out of the 60 or whatever. That's just not why I play. And in saying that, I also don't really care about winning much, right? Like if I did, I would play those things. This to me is like it's about the Star Wars universe, right? And which is something from a kid that has always like been kind of special to me, right? And so like Star Wars CCG offers all these cool things, right, outside of just mains and just objectives and all that stuff. And like I'm the guy who sits. I'll pull up all, let's say, dark side effects. This is how I kind of make decks too. And for scavengers, I'll pull up all the effects on the dark side and just start reading the ones that maybe I haven't taken a look at and thinking, can I build something around that? Okay, let's try, right? And so I have a ton of other decks, but like this one, I thought in a standard format, there's no way I can get away with playing Jawas, right? It's just you can't. And so, but I was like, I'm going to give it a try, and shockingly, this deck does very very well. And so, and I guess to know why, and we'll talk about it, but the meta in Scavenger, right? You get a lot of guys play. There's like 3 or 4 sort of major deck types on both sides, right? And so a lot of it is like for light side, there's sort of the the matching pilots, strategy, and there's and space drain, and there's sort of the operative deck, and that's really the biggest one, right? There's a lot of operatives on different like Wookiees and on caching and routes here and operatives to match and all that kind of stuff. And so this deck has no space in it, and so but I can control a little bit of the big drains, obviously, in this with Den of Thieves, and you'll see is that I don't start with it. But what I do is I start with inconsequential losses, right? So that is, you'll see I have, I think, 6 Jawa blasters in there, which aren't in there to actually hit people, right? They're really there to cycle 4s and forfeit to keep my Jawas on the table. And obviously I've got, I think, 12 Rontos in there, aside from being, the power 3 and drawing Destiny, with the Jawa alone. So a Jawa with a Jawa blaster on a Ronto holds a sight pretty well. And plus all those super high Destinies are nice in the deck. My Destiny average in this deck is pretty ridiculous. And so, which is why there's a couple of counter assaults in there, right? So, but then there's no try, because there are a couple of guys who play some sense and alter stuff, and if they're gonna sense my and alter my stuff, they're at least gonna get a little bloodied by it. And so and then obviously with resistance, it's just limiting those huge drains, because what'll happen is one of the main strategies is you get, like, let's say the Wookiee operative deck, right? The Wookiees and the Kashyyyk operatives, they'll play Ithorians and operatives, and then they get these drains of 3 and 4 on their home planet. And so with resistance, it just makes sure that they can't drain for more than 2 at a time. Plus, I'm canceling 1 a turn with, I think, 16 Jawas in there. I literally always have 1 in hand, and so that's really the way the deck works, and counters sort of the main strategies. And again, with the space, it counters it because I can cancel the Kessel drain, right? That's always the one I cancel, and then I can live through the others while I spread and drain. And so we'll talk about the sites. If you notice there's 3 deserts in there, I'll space them between like unique sites, so that my Rontos are really the only things, or unless they're playing some sort of light side vehicle, which maybe a skiff here or there, you'll get one. But I can move freely throughout the site path, where hopefully I will stick. Like if my opponent commits somewhere against some Jawas, I can hopefully stick them somewhere, right, where they can't be moving a lot, and then they just hang out there till the Sandwhirl gets them. So that's sort of the basics of how this deck works.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, that is.
Yeah.
Oh, that is not the right one.
This one?
What's with? I see the Kashyyyk. Oh, Ithorian. Okay.
Yeah. No, I was just showing, because you're mentioning Thorians and Kashyyyk operatives, and I was just showing people the visuals, what those look like.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, cool. And so those are a lot of the main light side strategies, right? Is those operatives or the space deck, and that's really what 90% of the decks you play are. Now, there's a user or a guy on there, Hustler 2. He's a big Scavenger guy too. Yeah. He does a little more like I do, where we make the wildest things. We even have gotten into where we make themes, right? Like like crazy themes, where what we call the Hillbilly Homestead game, where he made a droid army, and I made the only characters in the deck were Boshek and then Baru and Owen, right? And so I had to defend the homestead with those 3. I mean, so we do these things, so it's not really about winning all the time, but so I mean that's a deck. Those theme decks and games are a ton of fun, and that's why I play Scavenger. But again, a deck like this, I mean, and people are going to look at this and be like, oh, I could beat that with this and this. And sure, you could. Like, this deck isn't going to be something that beats everything, but I've now played it a lot and it beats a lot of things. And so um, it's in Scavenger, it has far bigger teeth than you would think it has just by looking at it.
Yeah, no, I agree with your perspective, and I think one of the most fun parts of any, card game or CCG, and Star Wars included, is just the ability to make your own decks. And so, no, I greatly respect that you try to make original decks. You commit yourself to that creative process, and part of that creative process is trying to limit yourself. So by limiting yourself to Scavenger, by trying to say, how can I make a Jawa deck the most effective given my tools? And I kind of love what you've come up here.
Uh,
Um, so no, absolutely, and I think that's great. I guess in Scavenger, I guess in some ways, because you can't use mains, I guess would you say it facilitates the creative process more, just because mains are off the table, and so by default you have to do it for different strategies, or how do I understand the
yeah.
creativeness, with Scavenger specifically?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think that is. I think when you kind of go in, when because I still do try to make some standard decks, but you go in and there's certain things where it's like part of your deck is already taken up in some way, right? You have to, like, there's no deck or almost no deck where you're not going to want most of the mains, right? And so you
Yeah,
have all these cards that are sort of already like predetermined, right? In Scavenger, there are zero cards that are predetermined. Like whatever, for instance, I went through it was a couple of weeks ago. I was going through the light side effects, and I'm like, I'm going to make a deck out of something that I find here, right? And so basically, I'm diving in, and so I found a hero of a thousand devices, right? And so um, I did. I went and I made. I just started going, okay, what's going to work with this, right? And so the creative process in Scavenger has like it's more open because you don't go in and know, well, 12 card slots are already going to be Luke and Saber and Obi and all, you know what I mean? So you don't have, there's no preset number of things that you have to have in a deck essentially to make it work, right? And so um, that's sort of the beauty, right? And so I mean, is it fun to do it the other way? Sure, a little bit, but there's nothing more fun to me than making a Scavenger deck out of nonsense that ends up working. And I haven't shared this, the Hero of Thousand Devices. I've played it maybe 8 times, and it's actually done really well. But it's so gratifying when I make a deck and base it around something that nobody ever uses, and cards that people just basically discard. And then I play it and it wins, right? Or even if it does well and put some of these proven strategies on the ropes, right? And so anyway, so that's sort of the my process, and why I think the creativity in Scavenger is it's like so much. There's so much like more to it because there's nothing preset that has to go in a deck. Nothing. Like the sky is the limit, right? In terms of what you're using. And so I dig it, man. I dig it.
I love it. I guess you have to have one side. I'm pretty sure you need some force, but yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with
yeah. Well, yes, but it doesn't have to be a certain thing, right? It's
you.
once
Right.
again, it's whatever. And then also I feel like with no objectives, when you go and you make another deck in the standard format right now, everyone starts with, okay, what objective do I want to use, right? And so certain things see a ton of play, and certain things see absolutely none. And so, like for me, that's again limiting. I almost think that the use of objectives is more limiting, just because at this point you kind of have to do it, right? And so, which we'll talk about. I still like to try to make standard decks without objectives, just because, just because.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I mean, a Dark Deal 44. I mean, he's used like a Dagobah cave deck. I've tried using like a Yoda's Hut deck, just as a base.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes not doing so. Some things can. I think Bastion Winkelhouse, he had like a Reflections 3 deck that started Tatooine. It was kind of like a meta. It was kind of like anti Watch Your Step. But no, I agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the thrill of possibility, and
Uh-huh.
there are certain objectives which are really powerful, and certain objectives which aren't, and then if you can do without an objective, I mean, I think that's great. So I love that.
Yeah. And I do like the less powerful objectives. To try those things. They don't really work like when someone's playing the good like stuff, but it's fun to try. So
100% agreed. So I'm guessing you have one special site. I'm guessing you start with Jawa Camp because that's your only way to deploy normally, unless they give you free force.
absolutely. So that's where I start. I mean, there's enough sites in this, and things are cheap enough where I can deploy fast enough where I don't really get, unless I get really unlucky, I don't really get choked on sites. You see, I have an extra of the Lars Moisture Farm. It's just a good one with the force drain, plus, and with no special text for the opponent. Whereas, in the Jundland Waste, I could actually do, an extra one of those as well if I wanted to maybe remove a desert or something. But I kind of feel like having 3 deserts. First of all, I'll always get at least one for my Sandwhirls, which Sandwhirls are pretty important in this deck. They take care of the spies, undercover spies for the light side, which in Scavenger, that's one thing that's in Scavenger that the light side has in abundance that the dark side does not, is spies, and then then undercover, right? And so much so that the light side even has non-unique spies and like Bothan spies, and so like there's just so many, and so Sandwhirl helps with undercover spies, as well as it makes your opponent even think about dropping guys on Tatooine because they're gonna go lost, right, at some point. And again, with spacing my deserts out, like I can always put a Sandwhirl fairly close to where they have guys, if it's my first one, and then plus, like I said, the strategy is to have like a unique site desert, where the travel between sites for my opponent is difficult also.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I saw someone play like a Tuscan Raider deck in a different game, and he did the same thing. He was kind of spacing out so that I guess that it'd be hard for you to follow him because these deserts naturally says except for scouts. And I don't know how many scouts there are. I guess this Bothan Spy is not a scout. I guess Arcona's a scout.
Arconas, there are tons of scouts in Scavenger. Like non-unique, unique. Like for non-uniques, there's just regular, Dracelian, not Dracelian commandos. There's Rebel Scouts, just the basic Rebel Scouts. There's Arconas. There's there's just a bunch of unique guys that are scouts. And I'm blanking on some of the others, but there's the guys from Endor. There's a ton of unique Endor scouts. Are the Dracelian Commando scouts maybe? I believe maybe they are, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's a scout here. Yeah, they're a scout. Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
And then there's a lot, right? And so yes, they can move around, but those are rarely used in the meta. And even if they are, maybe one guy here or there could move, but there's it's rare that someone has only scouts, and if so, hey, that's the matchup, right? And so you deal with it. But that's why I have the Rontos. They can move 2 as well, so I can move, and Jawas move for free, or they move for free when Jawa's on it, and so like I can move around at will, and generally do, right. And like I said, a Jawa with a blaster on a Ronto holds the site pretty well, and the so at least you're able to draw Destiny, even if that's the only guide there.
I like that. And I originally thought that you had two of these moisture farms just because you want to get the add one, because obviously this is a -1, but your average destiny here is, and you said it's high. I thought you were using that for this, but you're saying it's just for the +1 force strain. You're not really, you would never shoot here. Obviously the if destiny is 0, it's absolutely terrible, right? But I don't know if you
Well,
want to, you know.
yeah. Oh, I still shoot, man. Like I have no problem rolling the dice on this. But I'll always generally it'll be maybe later in the game, right? Like if I've already got say 5 of my sights out, I'm like, okay, then you kind of look at the odds, right? If I've got 28 cards left in my reserve deck and only 3 of them are sights, if a Jawa goes out shooting, there are worse ways to go out. At least he earned his spot in Valhalla, right?
So no, I like your strategy. You basically you have to deploy the Jawa camp, deploy your Jawas there, and I guess you're spread out. And if for some reason your opponent leaves a force open, you just pounce on that. So does that mean I
Yes.
don't know, is Rebel Barrier, Imperial Barrier, is that common in
Very, very.
very
So Rebel Barrier, Imperial Barrier, the assaults, surprise assault, counter assault. I The opponent almost always leaves force. Almost always leaves one. And so what this also does is this makes it to where if they leave one because they're going to do something, they're going to fire, like they drop a guy with a blaster and they plan on using that force to fire the blaster. Well, that force is mine. So it hinders a lot of things that they do. And so, yeah, I mean, all those things are common. The barriers are common. Those types of things. A lot of the interrupts. There's a lot of interrupts that are very common that use like one force, or weapons that use a force. And because we're not talking about there being a lot of lightsabers with uniques where it's like, oh, this guy fires for his own gun. There's no Boba Fett who fires his own gun for free. There's no Obi-Wan who swings his own saber for free. If you're going to have a lightsaber, there's someone you're paying for it, right? Like because it's going to be a non-unique saber. So you will get guys putting lightsabers on. I mean, I do it. I put lights when I'm playing light side. I'll put lightsabers on guys with 2 ability, right? And so I'll do it in light side, dark side, and because of the force drain bonus as well. But it's one of the most famous scavenger games I had with Hustler 2, and I would talk about this one because it was epic. It ended up with I was dark side, he was light side, and it ended up with somehow the game went to, we both had maybe a couple of force left. We had enough to have a one-on-one showdown. It was Jack Porkins on his side with a lightsaber against Ponda Baba on my side with a lightsaber, and we just ended the game in a lightsaber duel with those 2 guys because that's what you have. So everything costs force, right? And so if you do, like, Jawas will take force and ruin their plans by stealing their force, or they have to leave a ton, and then that's less cards that they're drawing. So either way, you're hindering them a bit just with the threat of being able to take their force. Even if you don't do it that turn, there's the threat of it, right? So
actually, I didn't even think about that. You're right. That makes sense that these blasters, you're right. I don't think any of these are for free. I don't know a weapon that's for free for regular folks in Scavenger. Is there a free weapon that you can shoot or no?
yeah, in fact, probably the most abused card in all of Scavenger is the Disruptor Pistol, because it's on both sides because it's only free if it's on a non-unique alien, right? So it has limitations, but it's abused, right? So light side, no matter what your strategy is, you almost always pack a couple of Baragwins, right, for the retrieving, weapons and devices and vehicles, but they're also a warrior, right? And so one of those common things to do is have Baragwins and use disruptor pistols. And disruptor pistols are so nasty, but again, it's limiting, and so the disruptor does fire for free if it's on a non-unique alien warrior. So, but again, that's not everything. You can't. Nothing's perfect, but it's a pretty abused card. So.
Yeah, I can see why, and the fact that it's lost immediately, and most people
Yes.
here. So,
That's whack.
yeah, yeah. I guess Jawas are not warriors. They give them guns, but they're not warriors.
They're
Okay,
not.
all right.
Yep. Yeah, and so that's why it doesn't really matter, because and my guns for my Jawas are really about forfeiting for 3, but they're also destined for, and then I cycle them, obviously, with the inconsequential losses, and so and they can hit the standard, the most common ability number in Scavenger is 2, right? So all the 2 ability aliens, the 2 ability pilots for the light side, even at a -1, if you look at the destinies in this deck, right? I've got a 50-50 shot of, or actually way better than 50-50 shot of hitting almost anybody, even with the -1.
That makes sense, but you're hitting them; they're not forfeit 0. So even if you hit them, I mean, they can still forfeit them. So I don't know the average forfeit value you'd say. I mean, it doesn't seem to be
So
huge. Yeah.
yeah, no, 3 or 4, but it allows you to, like, I'll fire it if there's someone specific I need to take out, right? I'm at a site, I need to take out, let's say, Figrin Dan or something. He's got Figrin Dan down because he's doing wagers. I want to take him out. I'll shoot at a guy like that. Or if there's a couple of guys he's got that work together. One that I can think of is there's like Pano and is it Britt? Maybe he works with is another guy that he works with, and maybe it's Britt. But you want to take out that combination, something like that. And so I'm strategic about who I actually risk firing at, right? And so it is Peno. And so because at a site that he has a destiny, you don't want that, right? So you drop, take one of them out. Same like Figure Dan, those guys that do something special. Like I save it, I save my risk of firing for guys like that.
Got it there. So, yeah, I definitely like the fact that if they're using a lightsaber or kind of a non-disruptor pistol, other weapon, or they're holding off a barrier, right, you can deny them there. You're still limited to Tatooine, and you're still trying to win the drain race. So, I guess Tatooine probably has the best native, force drain, bonuses. I mean, there is that one Cloud City site for light side. I suppose they could go there. It's like 2, dark side force icons. Maybe that's bad, but they can drain you there for 2.
Yeah.
This deck doesn't have the ability to like attack them. Like you don't have like a prophetess there, right? You don't have. I think there's Ardan, right? He can draw a battle destiny on his own.
Right.
Did you find they're just not thematic and you don't want to include them, or is there another reason? Yeah.
No, a little both. Like, and the original version of this deck, I had Prophetess, I had Ardan, I had David John, right? These guys that draw on their own. It just, after a few games, it didn't really seem necessary. And so with it didn't, the card slots didn't seem worth it after several tests, right? I could drop somewhere because it's not really enough to attack with just those few guys, right? So I think that in the first iteration of this deck, I had them both, and so even if I drop like David John and Ardan on a site, well, generally if they're kind of doing the same thing I am. If it's a space deck, it's fine. They're not really doing anywhere, but they're not deploying battleground sites either. They're just doing systems. And so But if it's one of the operative decks, the Wookiees with the Kashyyyk operatives, or the Raltier freighter captains with the Ithorians, and and the operatives for Raltier, if it's that, like, I have to have an enormous force to hold one of their sites, especially Wookiees, and Wookiees are pretty popular, right? So, like, trying to go to Kashyyyk and be like, oh, I'm just going to hold one of their sites, or I'm going to attack one of their sites. Man, you got Wookiee plus an operative plus an Ithorian plus, like, what a Baragwin. Like, you're going to get rolled either way, and it's kind of useless. And so I found that it's a good way to just take an extra beat down you don't have to take, is to try to go to a place like that. There are very few strategies that are just like, we're gonna, in Scavenger, you don't drain and spread with a guy or two usually, because a guy or two is not very powerful, right? And so whereas in Standard, you can be like, oh, well, I can drop Obi-Wan on a place and hold it by himself. I can drop this guy on a place and hold it by himself. And so 2 or 3 guys, you can do a surprise attack and take one of those guys out. Like, usually when you're facing an operative deck, there's stacks of guys there, and they have disruptor pistols, and they have, it just didn't, it never seemed to make much sense. And so even like dropping on Tatooine, it doesn't matter, because a Jawa with a Ronto is better than any of those guys, right? Because they're at that point power 4, draw destiny on their own. And with a blaster, it's like, I think, total forfeit of 7. So like a Jawa on a Ronto with a blaster is a forfeit of 7, but you can do it in increments, like get rid of the blaster first. And so they just seemed needless. And after taking a few beatings trying to go to a planet where they had their operatives and all that stuff, it wasn't necessary.
Okay. I like it. Cool. So three well-guardeds, 2 Twilight Advisors. Is this just because there's just a ton of Grimtosh Monarchs in this format, and you're just paranoid about this, or what?
Yes to everything you just said. So I'm super paranoid about it. So there are decks where I will start like a well-guarded or a Yarna, right? And depending on the side. This one, though, I opted for having extra, Den of Thieves and well-guarded, and then the advisors. First of all, because the destinies are big, right? And so while I needed the consequential losses for sure, and so I felt like that was kind of the most important one to start with. And I thought, well, it doesn't really hurt to have, the extra 6s and 4s in the deck, and then so I'll either draw one or I'll draw a Twilight Advisor. Like, I get both of them out. Of course, it'll happen that rare occasion where, for whatever reason, all 3 dens are hiding, plus all 3 well-guardeds, plus both of the Twilight Advisors. But it's like, that's just bad luck. That's going to happen sometimes, right? And so it's not really a huge concern, but Grimtosh and Monarch are a huge concern. And so it's because everyone knows in Scavenger that most decks, not all, but most decks play multiples, especially interrupts, right? So, and we talk about some of the main meta, but like for the dark side, and we'll kind of get into this with my light side deck, because because it's meant to beat a lot of those. But there's a lot of decks where trooper decks and all that kind of stuff where it's just a ton of interrupts, and so people know that. And so if, like in this deck, if they can get me holding a bunch of stuff early, then that almost ends the game. But even if well-guarded's out and I've got maybe 12 cards in hand. It's yes, yes, a Grimtosh would hurt, or maybe hurt if they played it, but the reward for them to spend 4 force and do a Grimtosh, and maybe knowing that all my Jawas are all protected, and really just interrupts that they might get, that is a deterrent. Yes, they could do it, and maybe I'm holding 2 Abyss and Ornaments or something of that nature. But if you look, I don't really have a ton of repeats of interrupts in this one, except for that, maybe a couple of things. But it's still, for my Jawas, it could be a killer, because it's happened on other decks where you draw your first hand. It just happens you get 4 or 5 of whatever your non-unique alien is, and on turn 1, your opponent throws down a Grimtosh or a Monarch, and suddenly half of the aliens you had in the deck are gone, and you might as well just throw in the towel at that point.
No, it can happen. And I think Fatty told a story. He was playing EBO, and he had 2 duplicate unique sites, and he has to have all of them, so dead. But no, absolutely no. I don't know. I've always when I'm using these cards, I want to wait for 12 cards. But if someone's determined to do 8 cards, I guess you could.
Yep, it happens. Because they want to do that early. Like, hey, maybe I'll catch them, without, or having 3 whatever. If you're playing Wookiees, 3 Wookiees in their hand, right? It's kind of devastating. Or 2 Baragwins, right? And if you only got 3 in the deck, and the Baragwin retrieval engine in Scavenger is huge, right? That's one of the main strategies in almost every deck is Baragwins, and losing your devices and weapons to force drains, and then just put in the deck, right? And so it's a good hand cycler, and you're getting high destiny cards back in the deck, and you're not really, force drains are essentially canceled, and so it's so.
No, I agree with you. And the light side has lots of ability 2s. Has lots of things to choose, and this thing being ability 2 makes a big difference too. It absolutely helps there. So
yeah,
no surprise there.
So I guess the answer is yes. Grimtosh and Monarch are huge problems in this deck, as are generally counter assaults and surprise assaults, because guys are usually pretty weak. So
very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this deck that you want to share?
No, man. Again, it's fun. It wins more often than it loses, but I think anyone who's ever played me, if you're watching this, I never mind losing. I'm not. I've never once been salty about losing a game, man. It's fun. This is why I play, not because I want this win-loss record or anything, right? And I don't even really play to win leagues. I want to play the game and have fun doing it. It's not fun, just doing standard stuff. I want to explore all the possibilities, and hey, if Jawas can't be played anywhere else, well, they can here. So, and I proved it. So
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to the next deck. All right, so your Elom Bomb. Okay, all right.
Yeah. All right, so this is probably I have 2 light side Scavenger decks that I would say have been the most successful. This is successful because there isn't an easy way to beat this, whereas my other one was and I've played it for a long time. There is an asteroid deck, right, with A-Wings and hyper escapes and out of nowheres and Raltier freighter captains, right? And so that thing won a ton. I just thought it was fun. It won a ton, but as soon as it started winning, people could tech against it so easily. And there's 2 or 3 cards, Point Man, Come Here You Big Coward. The dark side adds those, and suddenly my deck was just it was hurt. So that one, that was easy to sort of gear your deck against and protect. And I started losing a ton, which is fine. But then also I played it a ton, and so here's what I thought. So let's talk about the meta first, and then that'll tell you why I built this deck the way I did. Right. So some of the biggest strategies in Scavenger, troopers with trooper assaults and blasters, and I mean it's all that kind of stuff, and then also pilots with like Neanda and his stick and move tactic, where he dances in and out of systems, picks off a guy, runs away on the same turn with his extra move, and walkers, speeder bikes, and all those have in common is that they use a ton of Imperials, right? And so I thought, all right, what can I do to counter, first of all, Imperials, but not just that, all their vehicles, the speeder bikes, and the speeder bike deck is so good in Scavenger. Speeder bikes and walkers. Well, the easy thing, speeder bikes and walkers, is make everything inside, right? Everything's indoors. And so this deck is on Cloud City. It has one outdoor site, and I only deploy that if I feel like I need to go somewhere, right? And so I'll deploy that, or if I'm really hurting for force, I haven't gotten the others, and I'll talk about the start of this deck in a minute. It looks like there's very few sites, and there are, but it works out fine, and we'll talk about that in a second. But so the reason I made this is, well, what can I do to counter all these things that have Imperials and all these various vehicles, right? The ATSTs, the AT-ATs, the speeder bikes, the swoops, those types of things that get used pretty heavily. And so indoors, and what's good against Imperials, and I know they don't see a lot of play, but these Eloms are plus their one ability 2, which is huge, and their power +3 when present with an Imperial, right? And so and so it's like, okay, so if I do this and I stay inside, what's the best or what's the worst that's gonna happen? There aren't going to be these high-powered walkers that are also immune to attrition. There aren't going to be speeder bikes flying around deploying their cannons from reserve deck, and I'm not going to have like all the interrupts that go with that. There's a ton of interrupts that the biker deck uses that make it super deadly. That if you fire, you add a battle destiny. If you you can deploy a biker scout blaster on a biker scout guy out of the reserve deck. It's all these things that make it really, really good. Well, this helps kind of neuter that a little bit. And so this deck has been my most consistent, say, winning deck, because there isn't an easy way to beat it. But that's why I made this deck, was because so much of the dark side centered around these weaker but plentiful Imperials that were had some other toys with them, whether it was vehicles or weapons or whatever. And this deck helps that. And so if we just sort of want to talk about how I start with this deck, right? And so this is one of those decks where I don't start with an interrupt. I start with careful planning. And so that helps, obviously I'll be generating 5 right off the bat. So I'll start with the North Corridor, because that's a great site if they do decide to come to Cloud City. If I have a good force there, then even if they're holding one of my sites, I can cancel the force drain, right? And then I'll do careful planning, and then I will also start West Gallery, right? So that's 4 force for me, plus my own, so 5 minimum, and that's even if they're trying to force choke me or whatever. I at least start with that. And then once again, you'll see what I have in here is I have multiple Yarna, multiple bargaining table, and a couple of signals. And that's because I want to get those things out pretty much immediately. And almost always at this point, like when I first did it, I had to like, tweak it where maybe I only had 2 of each, and then I'd have games where I couldn't find them, and that hurt. So that's why I have so many. And it, so I'm always getting them. I almost always by second or third turn have both a Yarna out and a bargaining table, and it also helps because if I'm playing someone who's playing Sense and Alter, which they're surprisingly even with as low ability as a lot of these guys are, there's a couple of Scavenger players play Sense and Alter quite heavily. They try to use it with Prophetess or Boshek or whatever, and they're so if I do happen to get a bargaining table altered, I've got others in there, and I'm not just hosed, right? And so that's how I start, and the goal is to get guys first at the corridor, the north corridor, and generally, I think I have 10 or 11 Eloms, and again, Destiny 4, so which makes them great. The Destiny in this deck is also pretty ridiculous. In fact, if you don't count sites, there are only 3 that are less than 3, right? So the average is super high, and so if I think in this deck there's Figurdan, Brit, so there's 4 Figurdan, Brit, the Utris Matok, and the 1 lightsaber that are less than a 3 Destiny, and so like it's generally the average Destiny in this deck is between 4 and 5 if you add it all up. I want to say it was like a 4.4 or something, and so Figurdan always retrieves. My Destinies are always beating anyone's. I think immunity to attrition in this is the Prophetess is less than 3, or there's nobody I'm not hitting with my disruptor pistols, or nobody I'm not hitting, not basically negating their immunity to attrition. So I'm looking to get an Elom, and hopefully an Elom and a Bergwin out early at the corridor, and then I slap a Plastoid armor. If you look, I've got 6 copies of Plastoid armor, which may seem ridiculous, except it frustrates your opponent greatly, because with Eloms, it deploys. It's not unique. It gives them armor. Your guy's armor 5. So a Bergwin with a disruptor pistol and a Plastoid armor is a monster, right? Like it's a 5 armor to hit. It's retrieving destinies. He's picking guys off left and right with his disruptor pistol, and then the Elom providing the extra power if it's against Imperials, and so that's sort of the goal, is to do that. And then it also makes them a spy, which is a very underrated use of this, because you notice I also have undercovers. So if I have to, I can take my spies off world with my docking bay, if I need to, or if they come down and they grab a site and they're able to hold it, I can just pop an undercover spy over there. I've got a couple of Bothan spies. Those are ones I can. They're still good for bargaining table, but I can also deploy them off world as undercover spies to help cancel drain. So the drain cancel in this, with everything I have. So here's what cancels drains, right? So obviously bargaining table, cancel the biggest one. I've got undercover spies aplenty, right? I can always have undercover spies everywhere. I've got the corridor. So if they have one, I can cancel that drain. And so and then I have the Bergwin retrieval engine going, which essentially cancels a drain or 2 per turn, depending on how many Bergwins I have. So this is and then and then I can retrieve at some point when I have 6, 7, 8, 10 eloms out. I can retrieve with the wind chimes, and so this deck has ended up being extremely good, and in the scavenger meta, right? And so it's hard to crack. It's hard to crack Cloud City, my interior sites, with almost any deck. The only Imperial deck that has that opportunity really, the Trooper deck, if they happen to have everything with Trooper Assault and all that, that one can do it. But it's very, very solid, and so that's just in quickly the idea of this deck. Oh, one more thing, I think we'll talk about those 4 random Cloud City Troopers, which seem like, why wouldn't I just have more Eloms, right? It's because of the pistols, right? So Eloms aren't warriors, and so I want more than essentially just my Baragwins out there to be able to wield the pistols. Plus, they're good with Trooper Utrus.
Like it. No, yeah, he says what deploys free to power +2, and if anybody other Cloud City troopers or 4+2 were present, so these guys get up to 5. So
Yes.
you can forfeit them too, although yeah, you don't have the effect which lets you forfeit your weapons.
Right.
But so I guess the only thing we can say is that you don't have a great way to get back forfeited characters except through, of course, your wind chimes.
Right.
But yeah, no, I can see why this would be deadly. I love the fact that you've turned a card that we usually ignore, right? Because forfeit +2, armor 5, like who cares? But no, in
Right.
Scavenger, this is amazing because how many 6s is the dark side going to practically have?
Right.
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Some 5s and stuff, but it absolutely works in the deck, and it's a 5, 6 cards that are Destiny 5, right? And so that always helps too.
Agreed. I guess the only question is you don't have Pano here. Is that just an omission, or is the reason you have Brit without Pano?
Yeah, for actually, I don't need Pano. What I need from Brit is his surprise assault, or his assault counter assault protection, right? And so look there too, as it cancels when he's present with his conflict, which is pretty much everywhere here. He cancels counter assault wherever you have a spy or scout. Well, with my plastoid armor, I've basically got a spy everywhere, right? And so it basically, and again, assaults are huge in this format. It basically makes it like I'm assault proof, which is a big deal. So that's his inclusion.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. No, I guess I'm a miss for questions. The only thing I don't like is he has one ability, but I get that he's high force.
So I guess overall, like you're talking about not getting things back, and I don't have the inconsequential losses or whatever, superficial damage, and that's because I generally can get them all back with Baragwin anyway, and so I don't get the forfeit from that, but I don't tend to lose a lot of characters here. This ends up being a towards the end more of a drain race, and so just because they'll try to crack Cloud City and then usually it doesn't work, and so we kind of go our separate ways and try to drain, right? And so this actually drains pretty well, with my sights and the extra with the lightsaber, but I don't have to drain super well when they can drain almost for nothing, right? Because of, like we talked about, all my various drain protections. So I usually just I outdrain them, even if I can only drain for 4 a turn. They end up draining for 1 a turn. It still ends up in my favor quite often.
No, I like it. I guess, I notice the theme, like, you talk about barriers are common, right? I don't see barriers in your deck. I don't see like Hoojixes, I don't see any Hoojixes or I forgot the dark side version. Is that just because it's not necessary, Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't feel like I haven't felt like it's necessary. I haven't taken with this deck. I haven't taken any sort of like or any. I mean, occasionally the guy who builds up force and then drops like 12 guys on you. And of course, you're going to take the occasional beatdown, but it's not a problem. Like it's overall to try to defend against that. Again, when I've got you know a couple of eloms at a site, and they have got each elom is power 4, right? And so like I'm not afraid of beatdowns in this deck because my power is so high. And that's and I with disruptors, I'm still picking off a guy or two per battle. And so again, especially in Scavenger, nothing is perfect and foolproof, right? Because you are limited on certain of the like rare cards that do certain things. But I don't have the Hujix in here or things like that. I just don't. I don't feel like I've ever really needed it, right? And especially for throwing in an extra destiny of 1 for something that I have almost never really needed. If they manage to drop 12 guys at a site because they somehow got enough force to do it, or have some engine where each dude is free or something, hey, more power to you, man. Good job, good game. And I'll see what I can do next time against it. But just a big beatdown isn't a big problem with this deck.
Yeah, no, I guess what you're saying. You're right because there's no Dark Jedi presence effectively because
Right.
there's no Dark Jedi here. So,
Right.
deploying free stormtroopers, those one destinies aren't great here. So,
No.
yeah, it makes sense. And I guess obviously, alternatively, you don't have grabbers either. So you don't have wise advice. You don't have push on us. There is grappling hook. I don't see any grappling hooks. Are you just not worried about
Yeah.
stopping their dark maneuvers or whatever for
You
tracking?
know, I'm 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 not. I like and I think it's mostly because in this deck and I always start out whenever I build a scavenger deck, I actually usually start out with like what are you trying to push on us? At least putting 1 or 2 in the deck. And then if in my first few games, like it's just not necessary, because what I find is um, if they try to crack Cloud City and they can't do it, they don't generally try again, right? Unless they have to. And so I'm not that worried about used interrupts with this deck in particular. I mean, would it be nice to grab a couple? Absolutely. And have there been times where I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had what are you trying to push on us right now or something like that. But again, when you sort of even it out and I look at the games I've played, it's just hasn't been as necessary because it ends up being all right, well, I stay over here and try to beat you with my drains because I have all these protections, and then they generally back off and try to do what they do at wherever their own sites or their own systems or whatever. And so I'm not too worried about it. Again, with the speeder bike deck, I've essentially taken their speeders away. So am I really afraid of a bunch of biker scouts? Like, yeah, they with trooper assault, there might be some good battles, but like I just don't feel like at this point I've needed it. And I know that again that's some like general meta in other formats that I just haven't felt I needed in this deck. In other decks, if you look, I do have some where I'm less protected at my locations. This one, I just am not so worried about any specific thing that I use it.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I guess I'm not sure what else we could say about that. It sounds like you're very defensive, right? And I'm guessing
Yes.
it's usually Imperials, right? Because these are power one against aliens. So, you're
Yep.
assuming they have at least one Imperial in all their crew. I guess aliens are not that great for dark side, I'm guessing.
Well, they aren't. Some are, except a lot of the dark side aliens in Scavenger. The one thing they have different, as opposed to light side, is many of the dark side non-uniques are ability one, and they cost a ton, right? Like things like the more powerful ones, transitions and whiffids and things like that. They cost 3 and 4 to deploy, and they have ability of one, and so they're easy targets for disruptor pistols. And so, if they're playing, like I have a deck where I play, it's a dark side Hoth deck with whiffids and all that, but like, yeah, look, it's great. They're power 3, they're but if they're coming to me with that kind of stuff, they're paying 4 for it, and they're not getting any special bonus in their ability one. They have to have multiples to even draw destiny, and then if I have a disruptor pistol out, I'm hitting. I mean, when you see the destinies in my deck, I'm hitting every whiffet I aim at, right, or every transition I aim
For
at,
sure.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Which means,
so
yeah,
even
they would need at least 5. So yeah, no, they're in big
yes,
trouble. Yes.
yes, and so that's the one thing like about this when you say aliens. That's why I don't fear aliens quite so much, because they, but again, you're gonna have some of the unique stuff. There's a couple of unique aliens with ability 2 or 3, but even them, I'm probably hitting. And then there's not so many of them. Like you have to use that, and then in conjunction with other things, right? And so, it's not a huge fear. Like, this really isn't a deck where I'm afraid of beatdowns, even with added, uh, whatever interrupts and all that kind of stuff. There's not a ton, right? And so that's really why there's certain things that seem like they should go in a deck like this that you just aren't so worried about.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Corn's the only non-unique ability two they got here. So their
Right.
ability to damn it, like, okay, power two, power one, like, okay, this is
Right.
power two but costs 3. So this is, Tatooine only. So you're right, their options to attack you back are not very attractive. So okay.
Right. Right. So yeah, and so that's basically this deck. Um, and I know, again, you can always find ways to make it better, right? And so, and I still do tweak it now and again. It's like, oh, maybe I need an extra one of these, or like that's like recently I added an extra Yarna just because I feel like that one I really need to get out, and it's a 6, and so what harm does it do? So there are things that I'll play with here and there. After this, I may play after this, and people see the deck, I may play with it a little bit more. But if people are trying to find ways to beat this deck, it's going to take more than the inclusion of 1 card or 2 cards, the way it did with my asteroid deck, where including Point Man and Come Here You Big Coward, that wrecked me, right? Like I couldn't do a whole lot. And so about that, to tech against this, you have to do more than just include a card or 2. And so if you want to center your whole deck around beating the Eloms, I take that as a compliment that you had to
Yeah.
think about it hard enough to make a whole deck to do it. So yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right. Well, I think we've talked about this deck. I know we had one more deck to potentially show. How are we
Yeah.
on time? Do you have time for that, or should we do
I'm,
another time?
yeah, I'm good for a little bit.
All
We
right.
can we can do this one fairly briefly.
All right. Let me click here. Okay. So you tried to make a PDS2 update to your Elam
Yeah.
deck, and you chose to
Oh
go
yeah.
with the Rescue the Princess package. So kind of walk us through your thought process for how you try to do this.
Yeah. Um, so this deck, my first thought was before anything was, okay, I want to try, and I've done this with a couple of my scavenger decks, but with this one in particular, obviously I like the Eloms, right? I like what they offer. Um, and so I'm like, okay, so what do I need to do in a standard format to make the Eloms still make them something that are worth playing, right? And so, all right. So what I still want to do, I still want to go with interior sites, right? For the most part, I mean, you have to start in this. You have to start with the Yavin 4 Dog Bay, which is both interior exterior, but for the most part, it's interior sites, right? And if you see, I don't have a lot of them because Rescue the Princess has me start with 4 sites, and so that was one of the attractions to it for me, was the fact that I'm taking 4 of my sites out. So it's the detention block, corridor, Yavin, the Yavin docking bay, the war room, and then also the Death Star docking bay. So immediately I've got 4 sites out, right? And so I only have 1 more site in my deck. It isn't necessary, but I included just because if I wanted to have an extra, if I got it, I have an extra site to drain at eventually. And so I want to rescue the princess for that, right? And so it also puts Alea out, takes her out of the deck and puts her on the table. And then I can get her out. I actually can get her out pretty easily. And we'll talk about that in a second. But then that's a main. And yes, I started with that Leia. I thought about some others, but this is still a fairly early iteration. I've only played it 4 times in standard format. And it's actually 3-1 right now, which has kind of I've gotten some salty comments when I'm not playing the standard stuff, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, right? Just a little like people that are mad that you have something that isn't, you know, one of the 5 approved decks or whatever, and it wins. And so, you know, people don't like surprises, I guess. Whereas that's what I love. So, but anyway, so I started with that because it's, if you look at a lot of the same things, I have Bothan Spies, I have Eloms. What you'll see is missing. Obviously, there's no Cloud City, so no troopers, but I didn't use Baragwins here, right? Because Disruptor Pistol, they're not blasters, so I can't use like blaster proficiency to up my draw. And there's no, like, you know, like with a blaster rifle, it's Destiny +1 better than defensive value. Disruptor pistols are not. Disruptor pistols are just, you know, Destiny greater than defense value. And would it be great if I could zap, you know, like a Vader or an Emperor? Of course, but there's no way. Like, disruptor pistols are almost useless because abilities are so high in Premier to DS2. Like, you rarely are guys using, you know, important characters with ability 1 or 2, and so disruptors seemed pretty useless, and so Baragwin seemed like I might have done it with, you know, if I was going to use non-characters that weren't like combo with their weapon, and I had extra weapons. But when I decided to go with, like, you know, Han with blaster and Obi-Wan with saber, I was just like, yeah, I'm not gonna have a bunch of weapons in there, right? And so anyway, so that's the choices to eliminate some of those things, and instead, with that, you know, I opted for obviously the main characters, and we'll talk about those. But to start, so there's why I use Rescue the Princess, right? All those indoor sites that it begins with, and then so I'll start with usually Wise Advice, my 3 interrupts: Wise Advice, Insurrection, and Do or Do Not, right? And so those are, in fact, and you notice what I did include here. This is where you see the, like, what are you trying to push on us, right? And so because here I am looking to grab things like Force Lightning or all the various things that really, really suck, right? So whatever they happen to be using a lot of, I'm looking to grab it. And so while, you know, I use Rescue the Princess, like, it's not really the main goal of it, right? The main goal is really in this is to hold my few sites. Yes, I want to drain, but battle with this deck, right? With the best of them. And so while I have, all the main characters, a squad of Eloms is shocking. So in fact, I'm not going to name names. But I was playing a game against a guy on Gempin. He had Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. He had Emperor. He had Dark Side Lando, and uh, one of the scrub like unique stormtroopers from like Endor, right? So he had those four guys, and I dropped four Eloms on him, and all it was Vader, Emperor, Lando, and that against four Eloms, and our power was equal. And so it was, and then Vader missed his choke, and so we're going like he was really that's one of the salty comments I got. It's like, oh, this is stupid. I guess what do you say, oh, like kind of a passive aggressive, like, well, I guess spamming Eloms on me is going to work. I'm like, yeah, I guess it is, right? Like, and so, but again, that shows the power of I didn't even have one of my mains there. It was literally four Eloms against those four guys. Drew a big destiny, and it hurt, and he missed his choke, and so this deck is more about battle, right? And so and then all the standard stuff. Yes, I still have my spies, my Bothan spies, my bargaining tables. I still love canceling drains, but so I went with obviously Chewie with his gun, Han with his gun, and then I almost did Leia with her gun, but I don't know. I might still change that, right? I'm still, like I said, early iteration, and so this deck can battle a lot and high destinies. I can rescue Leia pretty easily by dropping a Bothan spy, playing "I'm here to rescue you." She's out, right? And so then I escort her home with Luke or Obi-Wan or whatever, and again, I'm here to 6. That doesn't hurt, right? So again, it's super easy to get her out. It's not even really a problem so far in 4 games, and so yeah. And so then again with the weapons, I've got Sorry About the Mess, Blaster Proficiency. I like Blue Milk, and so I know this is kind of odd inclusion into a deck like this, but it's such a great card to use in many different ways. Like, how many times have you been one force shy of what you wanted to do, right? Every game, like literally every game. It's a used 4, but then it also messes up your opponent's tracking, and that they're tracking something big, right? So they've got a 5 or a 6 on top. Well, right, they initiate battle. You Blue Milk them. That 5 or 6 is now in their force pile, and now it's a coin flip. It could be anything, right? Or better yet, it's closer to the end of the game. They only leave one card in the reserve deck, initiate battle, Blue Milk, and suddenly they can't draw Destiny either, right? And so you don't always use it on yourself. And I know that's probably people use that, but that's why I included it in here. I feel like it's a well-known but also kind of sneaky way to manipulate like tracking. Honestly, for me, it's mostly about moving whichever card they want to be on top of their deck to not be on top of their deck. So
No, I agree with you. No, we don't see it very much, but you're right. Whenever you get down towards the end game, and people tend to, activate just enough force so they can like deploy like a doom stack and have Vader, do his sabers or choke or as tracking. You said you're right. If you're able to save this card, it can make the difference in the world. I agree with you. No, I like the concept of surprise because people don't expect you to do an Elam deck. I would I have a few ideas. There is like the prisoner card, right? The prisoner Leia. you might
Yeah.
might consider her just because she adds to the force drains, right? You kind of help,
Huh?
win that drain race, and then she has, she doesn't have this penalty. Whereas normally, I think if Leia dies, this objective can be placed out of play completely. Granted, you're not really playing this objective straight per se. I mean, you could put her all the way here if you wanted to,
Yeah.
and it's not bad, right? Because making
Yeah.
them use force and doing that kind of stuff is cool. Um, and a lot of people when they do this, they do 8d8, right? They do this right,
Yes.
which he is a
Yeah.
Destiny 5.
Right.
However, obviously if you're going for the sixes here, then you talked about not being hidden. Well, if you have insight, so I would consider this, because if you fight a hunt
Okay.
down, right?
Yeah.
Or you find like you fight numbers, it's gonna be good. Well, this six will hit a Vader, right? If you have that, right? Even with a Chewie, just shooting here.
Oh,
So
right.
um,
Okay.
maybe think about that. Maybe think about Honor of the Jedi, just because if you're fighting a hunt down, if they're pinging you, or if they're trying to force drain you to non-battleground, this can,
Yes.
save your day,
Okay.
to help you potentially. I would say consider. I'd also say, you talk about fours, right? Obviously, you're wanting high destiny. Like there's a lot of similar to this in Prophet. Like, could be worse. Could be a nice
Yeah.
four. Two fours mean you can hit, right? So this and Elam if you're attacking.
Right.
You're solid. You're solid, dude. That means your OB can hit whatever. That means if you had a Luke with a saber, he could hit.
Right.
And depending on what Han would. But no, I mean you do have the potential with Han if you keep a high sixes. I'd have to look through here for like other decent sixes. There's not a ton there, but no, I like it.
Right.
I guess the only thing I'd say is you only have 11 Elams. I know it's hard to fit those things. It might be nice if you could do 12 or 14 or whatever, and you're starting
Yes.
with insurrection. You don't have any ability to pilots, and I think this objective
Yeah.
lets you deploy already. Go ahead.
I would say I'm glad you brought that up, because kind of looking at it, this has been changed since my last game. I actually had initially I had a couple of docking bays in there I think for more force, and I realized I didn't need it, and so when I was talking about my starting, I went, you know what? Why do I still have this in here, right? And I can swap that out for something else.
Yeah, I might consider thinking about it. Now. If you did want to keep the docking bay, there is like Tatooine docking bay 94. So if you
Right.
wanted to do like the beggar combo, right, you could do that because these Elams,
Right.
they are expensive. They cost three,
They
and so you need
do.
force. And there's also, of course, there's staging areas. So you control a docking bay, you're getting more force.
Right.
So maybe if you can hold a docking bay more force, because I think this deck's a little bit low on force. It seems could be wrong.
It is.
Yeah, and so that might help you some in addition to Twixes or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right, and that is so far the thing. I mean, again, having only played 4 games, yes, it's done well, but there are things that I'm still tweaking. It definitely takes a few games to kind of figure it out, right? But what I like is, for me, being able to make something based off one of my scavenger decks and bring it over and it compete, right? Like even the game I lost, it was a super close game. I think the differential was like 6 or 8, right? Like it was that close. And
Yeah.
so, to have it compete and knowing that there are things like looking at it right now, okay, there are certain things that can go. And I think I would like to get one more Elom in there, and figure out the starting stuff a little more. But like you said, some good suggestions, and I'm gonna go and look at that because I'm thinking about playing this deck in Andy's, the tournament he's putting together or whatever.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. No, absolutely. No, I think no, I like the fact that this deck, packs a surprise. People aren't expecting to see, kind of an Elam swarm. People are not expecting a blue milk. And obviously, you have multiple undercovers, so you can kind of, protect yourself from being drained at certain sites if the dark side doesn't come to you and you do have some high destiny. So you definitely have the potential to pull the surprise on the opponent. That's definitely something I like about this deck, and I think that's really cool.
that's what I like too. Like, to me, is that's what's fun, right? Like I have no interest in playing hunt down myself. I have no interest in playing, any of those things myself, just because everyone does, and that just doesn't. You know, how can it be mine if someone has already done it, and not just somebody done it, but everyone's done it, and you know, one version maybe one or two cards off from another. I mean, it's still the same deck mostly, right? Like that. I don't want to do that, and everyone knows it. They see you playing Hunt Down or something like that. They know what's coming. You know, I like to not be predictable, and so I'm gonna keep doing things the way I do them, and playing, you know, the way I like to play. That's more fun. And win or lose, I don't care. You can ask the guys that play with me. Winning, losing doesn't matter, right? It's fun to win, sure it is. But at this game, like just having fun playing the game and doing something cool is what I'm about, man.
I couldn't agree more. That's ultimately why we're here, and I think that's probably a great ending note. So,
Indeed,
thank you,
sir.
thank you, Mike. Thanks, MGB. Can't wait to share this with everyone else. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.